Hello and welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical research and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson. This week, the habits of the witches of Thessaly. In the Ars Magica setting, the founder who draws all the others together is a witch of Thessaly. Now, what the witches of Thessaly were up to in Ars Magica varies depending on which set of folklore you use, and I personally prefer the folklore in which they were a school of ancient astronomers led by a woman named Aglianaike. Now, I prefer that because it ties into the astronomical mysteries of the order, but that's not what we're exploring this week. We're exploring the style that was used in the Bonasages chapter when describing Trionoma, for example. When you listen to the Golden Ass by Apuleius, also known as the Metamorphoses, you'll see that there's a great similarity between Trionoma's people and the Archnecromantrix, Gwarna the Feated. But enough from me. Now to a LibriVox recording released into the public domain by a reader who calls himself Heffid on the forums. I don't have a better name for Heffid, so thank you very much to him.
While I was yet a pupil, I went to Miletus to see the Olympic Games, and as I wished also to visit these places of this famous province, having travelled all over Thessaly, I came with ill omens to Larissa, and while roving through every place, the money which I had brought with me for my journey being very much diminished, I was exploring some means of mitigating my poverty, I beheld in the middle of the forum a certain tall old man. He stood on a stone, and proclaimed with a loud voice, If any one wishes to be the guardian of the dead body of one deceased, he shall be well rewarded for the undertaking. Then I said to one that was passing by, What is the meaning of this proclamation? Are the dead in this place accustomed to run away? He answered, Be silent, for you are very young, and perfectly a stranger, and you are also ignorant that you are in the middle of Thessaly, where witches everywhere lacerate with their teeth the faces of the dead, and such conduct is to them the solace of the magic art. To this I replied, Tell me, I beseech you, in what does this funeral guardianship consist? In the first place, said he, you must incessantly watch through the whole night, with open and unwinking eyes, continually fixed on the dead body, nor must your sight ever be diverted from this object, nor in the smallest degree turned from it. For these worst of witches, having transformed themselves into any brutal body, creep in latently, so that they easily elude the eyes both of justice and the sun. For they change themselves into birds, and besides this, into dogs and rats, and even into flies. Then too they oppress the guardians with sleep, by employing dire enchantments. Nor can any sufficiently define the magnitude of the frauds which they devise for the sake of gratifying their libidinous appetite. Notwithstanding this, however, not more than 4 or 6 pieces of golden coin are offered as the reward of such a dangerous undertaking. And in addition to this, which I had almost forgotten, if he who watches does not on the following morning restore the dead body entire, he is compelled to repair the whole of whatever has been bitten and taken from it, with discerptions from his own face. On hearing this, I invigorated my mind with a masculine strength, and going directly to the crier, I said, Cease to proclaim any farther, a guardian is present, ready prepared for you. Tell me what the recompense will be. You will receive, said he, 1,000 pieces of money, but be very careful, O young man, to preserve the dead body of one of the principal persons of this city from most iniquitous harpies. You narrate to me, I said, absurdities and mere trifles. You behold in me a man of iron, sleepless, and certainly more sharp-sighted than Lynceus himself, or Argus, and one who is all eye. I had scarcely finished, when he immediately brought me to a certain house, the gates of which being closed, he introduced me through a narrow back door, and pointed out to me a bedchamber, which was dark in consequence of the window shutters being closed, and a woman clothed in a black garment weeping, near whom the crier standing said, This man confidently offers to watch the dead body of your husband for the proposed reward. but she, removing to each side the hair that hung down before her face, which even in sorrow was beautiful, and beholding me, said, Endeavour, I beseech you, to perform the office which you have undertaken vigilantly. Lay aside all care, I said, and only procure for me some overplus adapted to the labour of my undertaking. To this assenting, she hastily arose, and brought me into another bedchamber. There she disclosed with her hand a dead body that was covered with very white linen, in the presence of 7 witnesses who had been introduced into the room. And having wept for a long time, and desired those that were present to bear testimony, she diligently pointed out to them every particular. A certain person at the same time describing in a writing table the parts of the body, which he severally touched for that purpose. Behold, said she, his nose is entire, his eyes are in a sound condition, his ears are safe, his lips have not been violated, and his chin is whole. You, worthy citizens, be witnesses of this. And having said this, she sealed the tables and departed. But I said to her, Be so good, madam, as to order that all things may be procured for me which are necessary to this undertaking. What are these? Said she. I replied, A large lamp, sufficient oil to supply it with, till it is daylight, warm water with wine vessels and a cup, and a tray furnished with the remains of the supper. Then she, shaking her head, said, Begone, foolish man, who dost expect supper, and the relics of feasting, in a house full of sorrow, and in which for so many days no smoke has been seen. Do you think that you have come hither to feast? Rather assume, as adapted to this place, sorrow and tears. And at the same time, turning to her maidservant, she said, Myrrhina, immediately give him a lamp and oil. And shutting me in the bedchamber, she departed. I therefore, being thus left alone to the solace of the dead body, having rubbed my eyes and armed myself to vigilance, soothed my mind by singing. When lo, the twilight commenced, the night advanced, still deeper and deeper night, and at length midnight, and my fear became greatly increased. But then a weasel, suddenly creeping into the bedchamber, stood opposite to me, and looked very sharply at me, so that the little animal disturbed my mind by its great audacity. At length, however, I thus spoke to it, Depart, impure beast, and hide yourself with little mice that resemble you, before you experience our powerful blows. Why do you not go away? The animal fled, and immediately left the chamber. But directly after, a profound sleep suddenly merged me into its unfathomable depths, so that not even the Delphic god himself could easily distinguish which of us two that were prostrate was more dead. I, thus inanimate, and requiring another keeper, was nearly not there. Scarcely had the streperous song of the crested cohort proclaimed a truce to night, when I, being at length roused, and terrified in the extreme, ran to the dead body, and taking the lamp with me, and uncovering the face of the corpse, I scrutinized every member, and found all was right. When lo, the miserable wife entered, weeping, with the witnesses of yesterday, being very solicitous for the event, and immediately falling on the body, and kissing it frequently, and for a long time, she explored everything, by the testimony of the lamp. Then, turning herself, she called Philodespotus, the steward of her house, and ordered him to pay me, without delay, the wages of a good guardian. This being immediately presented to me, We give you the greatest thanks, she said, O young man, and by Hercules, for having so well accomplished this undertaking, we shall afterwards rank you among the rest of our domestics. To this, being delighted with the unexpected gain, and astonished at the sight of the glittering pieces of gold, which I frequently shook in my hand, I said, Indeed, madam, you may consider me as one of your servants, and as often as you may be in want of my assistance, confidently command it. I had scarcely thus spoken, when the domestics, execrating the nefarious omen of my words, took up arms of every kind, and pursued me. One began to strike me on the face with his fist, another on the shoulders with his elbows, By some I was kicked, and by others my hair was plucked off, and my garment was lacerated. And thus, being mangled and torn in pieces by reproaches and maledictions, like the proud youth Adonis or Orpheus, the son of the muse Calliope, I was thrust out of doors. And while I recover myself in the next street, and too late call to mind my inauspicious and imprudent speech, and confess that I deserved to suffer even more blows than I had received, behold, the dead body was now carried out, accompanied for the last time by lamentations and clamour, and was brought through the forum with all the pomp of a public funeral, and according to the rites of his country, in consequence of having been one of the principal men of the city. To the side of the corpse came a certain old man, tearing his native hair, and seizing the bier with both hands, and with a voice raised indeed, but interrupted with continual sighs, he proclaimed, By your faith, O citizens, and by your public piety, give assistance to your murdered fellow citizen, and severely revenge a most atrocious deed on this abominable and wicked woman. For she and no other has destroyed by poison this miserable young man, the son of my sister, in order that she might gratify her adulterer, and invade his hereditary possessions. After this manner, the old man loudly uttered querulous lamentations, interrupted by sobs. In the meantime, the common people began to rage, and were impelled to a belief of the crime, by the probability of its having been committed. They clamorously call for fire, they demand stones, and they incite the boys to the destruction of the woman. But she, loudly lamenting, and adjuring all the divinities in the most sacred manner possible, denied that she had perpetrated so great a crime. The old man therefore said, Let us refer the decision of the truth to divine providence. Saclas the Egyptian is present, who ranks among the first of the prophets, and who agreed with me some time since, for a great reward, to recall for a little while the soul of this dead man from the realms beneath, and to reanimate this body. And having thus said, he brought into the midst of the bystanders a certain young man, clothed in linen garments, who had on his feet shoes made from palm leaves woven together, and whose head was entirely shaven. The old man likewise, having for a long time kissed his hands and embraced his knees, said, O priest, take pity on me, I beseech you, by the celestial stars, by the gods of the infernal regions, by the natural elements, by the silence of night, the Coptic enclosures, the Nilotic increments, the Memphitic arcana, and the Pharaic sistra. Give to this body a short use of the sun, and infuse a small portion of light in eyes buried in eternal night. We do not wish to resist fate, nor to deny the earth a thing which is her own, but we only request a short space of life, as a solace of vengeance. The prophet, being thus rendered propitious, took a certain herb, and laid it thrice on the mouth of the dead body, and placed another on the breast of it. Then, turning himself to the east, and silently imploring the increments of the august sun, he raised the eager attention of those that were present to so great a miracle, by the form of such a venerable apparatus. I mingled myself with the crowd, and standing on a certain more elevated stone, which was behind the bier, I observed everything with inquisitive eyes. And now the breast of the corpse began to swell with respiration, the salubrious vein to have pulsation, and the body to be filled with spirit. The corpse also arose, and thus spoke to the young man, Why, I beseech you, do you bring me back to the offices of a momentary life, after I have drunk of the Lethean cup, and have swum over the Stygian marshes? Desist, I pray you, now desist, and suffer me to remain in my rest. These words were heard from the body. But the prophet, being a little more excited, said, Why do you not narrate everything to this crowd, and disclose the secrets of your death? Do you not think that the Furies can be called forth by my imprecations, and that your wearied limbs may be tormented? To this the reanimated body answered from the bier, and thus with a groan addressed the people. I was destroyed by the nefarious arts of a new wife, and being compelled to take an envenomed potion, I delivered to an adulterer my yet tepid bed. Then the egregious wife assumed confidence from the present circumstances, and resisting, with a sacrilegious mind, contends against her confuting husband. The vulgar are inflamed and divided into contrary parties. These contend that the most execrable woman should be immediately buried alive with the body of her husband. Others are of opinion that no credit should be given to the lying testimony of a dead body. The subsequent speech, however, of the corpse dissolved this contest, for again profoundly groaning, it said, I will give you manifest documents of unviolated truth, and will indicate to you what is known to no one else. Then, pointing to me with his finger, when this most sagacious guardian, said he, of my body, diligently watched over me, old enchantresses, ardently longing after the spoil of my members, and on this account having frequently been in vain changed into other forms, when they found they could not deceive his sedulous attention, having at length thrown over him the dark mist of drowsiness, and buried him in profound sleep, they did not cease to call me by my name, till my infirm joints and cold members struggled by sluggish endeavours to obey the mandates of the magic art. Then this man, who was alive indeed, but dead only with sleep, because he had the same denomination with myself, rose, ignorant of what had been transacted, on hearing his name, and spontaneously walking like an inanimate shadow, though the doors of the bedchamber were carefully closed, suffered mutilation instead of me, his nose first, and afterwards his ears, being amputated through a certain chink. And that other things might correspond with the fraud, they accurately adapted to him wax, fashioned in the shape of his mutilated ears, and provided him with a waxen nose, similar to his own. And now the miserable man stands here, having obtained the reward, not of his vigilance, but of his mutilation. On hearing this, I being terrified, began to try my fortune. With my hand I take hold of my nose, it follows my hand, I touch my ears, and they fall off. And while I am pointed out by the direct fingers and oblique nods of those that were present, while there was an ebullition of laughter, I escape between the feet of the surrounding crowd, wet with frigid perspiration. Nor, being thus mutilated and exposed to ridicule, could I return to my paternal abode, but with my hair falling on each side of my face, I concealed the wounds of my ears, and covered the disgrace of my nose with this linen cloth closely applied to it.